Our second scripture reading comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 1 through 18. Hear the word of the Lord. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks ahead of me because he was before me." From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is the only Son, himself God, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Today is a day of transition. After nearly 4 months of messages from the Hebrew Bible, or Old Testament, we come to the Gospel of John in the New Testament, where we best set in and get comfortable, because we will be here for a while, all the way through Easter. Question: have you ever listened to or seen a production of the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, Oklahoma? Or any other big musical? They start off with an overture. So in an overture, you hear all these snippets of songs that are going to be sung in the musical. In Oklahoma, first we hear a few bars of "The farmer and the cowman should be friends," and the little bit of "Poor Judd is dead," and then it transitions into "Many a New Day," and so on and so forth, ending with a bit of the title song, Oklahoma. So an overture is like a little musical charcuterie board, giving you little tastes of lots of different things. Well, I was listening to a podcast this week where the hosts mentioned a commentary where the authors compare this opening passage from the Gospel of John to a musical overture, because in it we find a number of themes that are going to appear later on in the Gospel. Themes like light and darkness, themes like the world versus the reality of God, themes like life, seeing, believing, and above all, the identity of Jesus as God's only Son, God's own Word, which has been with us all along, but is now coming among us in a whole new way. We'll come back to all of these things in the weeks and months ahead. For today, let us linger for a moment on verse 16. From his fullness, we have all received grace upon grace. Notice how it's not something in the future. It's not we will receive grace upon grace. We have received. What might that look like? Well, last week I went to New York to be present at Sotheby's for the auction of our Tiffany medallion window. My younger daughter, Rachel, went with me. She had never been to New York before, and she made lots of plans for us. From the moment we landed at LaGuardia the day before the auction, she had us out and about, busy with activities. On the morning of the auction, we took a cab to Sotheby's. We met up with Jim and Shirley Martin and Bill and Mary Nichols from our church, who had also come for the auction, and we took our seats. And Bill said, "Well, I've got some bad news. So far, nobody has registered to bid on our window. But things can happen fast." Now, I had been nervous that maybe the window would not sell for as much as I know some of us hoped it might. I had also been a little concerned about what would happen if it sold for a huge amount of money. Worried that maybe if we had too much, we might think that we don't have to change anything. I had not expected that it wouldn't sell at all, that it would not quite meet the reserve amount that Session voted on last summer. But that's what happened. Well, those of us in New York had planned to eat a celebratory lunch afterward. We had thought that we would be breathing a collective sigh of relief and rejoicing in new funds to invest in ministries here. Well, instead, we had a lunch where everybody was a really good sport. There were lots of tasks to do, like check in with the folks back home, make sure the news people had their facts straight. I kept thinking about those of you who showed up with so much hope and excitement for the watch party here at church. What a colossal letdown that must have been. And to quote Carol Sook after last week's sermon, aren't we so lucky to have Pat, who shepherded everyone through all of that? Well, still a bit numb, I walked the 1.8 miles back to our hotel in the bitter cold with Rachel, who was feeling bad for me, but also very excited because she had just got word that morning that she was now on the priority list to get into the Stephen Colbert show that afternoon. And while Rachel did that, I made myself go to the Museum of Modern Art, which was close by. And I was pleasantly surprised to discover I could still appreciate that experience, even though I was still processing the events of the day. Well, the next morning I woke up, and the whole sad weight of what had happened just kind of settled over me. Months of planning and anticipation, and this was the result. I said to Rachel, I'm trying to remember the last time I felt this disappointed. And then I remembered a time back in 2013 when there was a job I really, really wanted. I had been serving as the associate pastor at the First Presbyterian Church of Lee Summit, Missouri. And it was getting to be time for me to move on. The call I sought was a solo pastor position that would let me preach more, and it paid much better than the presbytery minimum I was making in Lee Summit. It was very close to where I lived, so Rachel wouldn't have to change schools. It came down to me and one other candidate. And when the chair of that church's pastor nominating committee called to tell me they were going with the other candidate, she said to me, a little bit inappropriately, I thought, Sandra, you really need to move to Topeka and be with your husband, because I was engaged to Rod Brown at the time, though we hadn't set a date yet. And I was just absolutely devastated. Oh, how that stung. There were simply no other calls in the area that were right for me. I felt thoroughly stuck with no clear way forward. Less than a year later, I found myself doing exactly what that PNC chair had advised me to do. I married Rod and moved to Topeka for a temporary associate pastor position here at First Presbyterian Church. I was hesitant a little bit to take on another associate pastor role, but so grateful to be in the same town as Rod. More than 12 years since the bitter disappointment of hearing no when I wanted something so much, I can look back and say, thanks be to God. What amazing grace God showed me. If I had received and taken that Kansas City call, I would have missed out on all the blessings of life I have had here. My loving marriage to Rod, the unique adventure of living up in Meriden for 7 years, rich friendships full of laughter, a house I love, the astonishing gift of finding dusty nickels at just the right time after Rod had died, and this wonderful call that is not easy, but is easily the best job I have ever had. Grace upon grace upon grace upon grace. Well, back to New York. Rachel's schedule for us the day after the auction had not allowed any moping time. There was going to be none of that. So I put on my big girl pants, literally and figuratively, and we bundled up and headed first to some famous bagel place that she had researched, which I did not know a bagel could be like that, and then off through Central Park to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I wondered if I really had it in me to wander through yet another museum, given all the art I saw on our trip to Amsterdam in October and everything I'd already seen at the Frick and MoMA, and especially given my overall mental state. I psyched myself up to be a good sport again. Well, friends, Rachel and I stayed at the Met for 8 solid hours. We had planned for 3 or 4, but it's like Vegas in there. It just sucks you in and sucks you. Let's go see that. Well, just that one more thing, just that one more thing. All the beautiful paintings and sculptures and mosaics and something else that I'm saving for next week's sermon. We saw magnificent Tiffany windows that stopped us in our tracks and made us really appreciate anew what we have here in Topeka. We wandered around till our eyes were about to explode, and then we wandered around some more. And then we had a magical walk home where we took in the sights and the sounds of New York at Christmas. The wind had stopped, so the cold wasn't quite so bad. We grabbed a slice of pizza and a couple of cannolis from a bakery across the street and fell asleep in our room, which overlooked Broadway and Times Square, and we were asleep within 45 seconds. More grace. Life oozes with grace, even and especially during the rough parts. I could tell you stories for hours. And if God does that for me, how much more for this congregation? God is the God of more life, more love, more light, more grace. Grace upon grace. It's like the cream cheese they give you for your bagel in New York. Practically a whole tub just for one bagel, way more than you would ever need. Most of us are focused on giving right now as we head into those final days before Christmas, and you're really good at it. We've got some giving virtuosos out there. but it is vital to pause and receive. When we do that, when we look at our lives and notice all these layers of grace, then we can be fully present in this moment without fear, knowing that God has already given us precisely what we need, even when the answer is not what we wanted, and the way forward is not fully clear. From his fullness, we have all received grace upon grace upon grace upon grace.